Call to order. Ms. Secretary, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Fandle,
Here.
Mr. Snyder, Mr. Gordon,
Here.
Mr. Guidry,
Here.
Mr. Brookter,
Here.
Mr. Ballantyne.
Here.
Mr. Chairman, we have a quorum.
Thank you. Did everybody get a copy of the minutes from August 7th?
Yes, sir.
Can I get,
Make a motion to accept the minutes from our last meeting.
A second motion.
all in favor?
Aye.
Moving on, our first case is BOA case number 2018-115 BOA. This was postponed from our August 7th meeting. Request by applicant for a variance at an HC3 highway zoning, commercial zoning district to reduce the required 20-foot green space to 10-foot along Hollycrest Boulevard and to reduce the required 20-foot green space to 8.2 feet along Highway US 190. The property is located at 500 US North Highway 190, Covington, Louisiana. The applicant is Circle K Stores Incorporated / Randy Horns. The representative is Reagan Majori and Kevin Talabak. The applicant originally requested to reduce the required 20-foot green space to 10 feet along Hollycrest Boulevard to reduce the required 20-foot green space to 8.2 feet along US Highway 190. A revised plan was submitted requesting to only reduce the required planting area along Hollycrest Boulevard from 20 feet to 12 feet. The green space variance is being requested in order to restore an existing commercial site currently developed with a gas station and canopy with a car wash and parking spaces for pre-scrubs, detailing, and vacuum of vehicles. Staff comments, please.
As stated, the request is now to reduce the 20-foot green space to 12 feet along Hollycrest Boulevard to allow for 11 pre-scrub parking spaces and also to allow for sufficient stack-up of cars waiting to enter the car wash. And I would like to point out that the size of the existing green space along Hollycrest Boulevard varies from 10 feet to 2 feet in width. Although the number of pre-scrubs and vacuum parking spaces could be reduced to meet the minimum green space requirements, staff is not opposed to the request for mainly two reasons. First, the reduction of the required green space along Hollycrest Boulevard would allow sufficient space to provide 2 stack-up lanes to ensure that all cars awaiting to go through the car wash are on the property completely off of Highway 190. And second, the proposed development, as shown on the attached plan, will definitely contribute to the improvement of the appearance of the site and to the North Highway 190 corridor. Moreover, the attached plan shows that the site will be in full compliance with the landscaping ordinance in regard to the required number of trees and shrubs. Also, the number of existing access to the site is proposed to be reduced from 2 driveways to 1 driveway along 190.
Is the applicant present? Would you please state your name and address for the records, please?
Kevin Talabak, 1450 North Highway 190.
Mr. Talabak, do you have anything further to add from the comments you heard?
If you need it, I mean, I have photos of the existing site, and I also have the layout if it was needed to discuss why we needed this variance.
Okay, I see we have a couple questions. I guess Mr. Fontenot?
Yes, I just wanted to, this is one of those projects, if you may remember, we came to you with the project at the Claybird Hills, where there was an existing facility that was vacant, and we went through a lot of work with the applicant and was able to work out what has turned into a very nice reuse of that property. And while this one has some different circumstances, we think this is a similar situation where essentially, in case you haven't picked up on it, this is the Shell station at 190 in the interstate that is closed presently across from the racetrack. That is an aged Shell station. They will be increasing the green space, reducing driveways on 190. We think, we've gone through the sometimes agonizing on the applicant's part process of trying to work out a plan that works best for that site. We think this city recommended that you grant these waivers. Again, they're increasing green space from what is presently there. It just doesn't meet the code that we would if this was new construction.
Mr. Brichter, you have a question?
Now, Mr. Fontenot, that whole station is gonna be torn down completely, or just gonna be renovated?
No, it'll be torn down, and new building will be built on the north side of the property, where you have the entrance by the OTB. The building will be up at that side. What you'll have towards the service road will be the vacuum stations, those prep stations. And one of the problems with these car washes, particularly when you hit a nice weekend, when you hit a nice Saturday, they have a real stacking problem. And we went through extensive discussions on them, they're trying to get where we have multiple lanes of stacking on the site, so they're not on 190. We have a problem right now with the one on Highway 25, just north of the interstate, on the west side of the road, where occasionally they're trying to double stack there too, and they'll be backing out onto Highway 25. Similar problem what you see with Chick-fil-A when they're really blowing and going. There's some uses that just, when you have the right conditions, things back up. And car washes is one of those uses that if you don't account for adequate stacking on the property, you end up with a problem on the highway.
Gotcha.
Do we have any more questions of an applicant?
Yeah, I'm good.
Hearing none, can I entertain a motion?
Motion to approve the variance.
We have a motion to approve. Do we have a second?
Second.
Do we have any discussion? Hearing none. This is gonna be, this will be our first time voting with our keypad, so I just wanna, we haven't done this before, so you gotta bear with us. This is our first attempt of voting by the machine. Before, we used to take a roll call and just voted, but this way, it's gonna be a little different. So hopefully, everything will work out. So we have a motion on the floor. As everyone can see on the screen, you have the buttons to press either for, against, or abstain. And at this time, will all the members please vote?
Motion carried.
I'm gonna say you did better than the council did their first vote.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our next case is BOA case number 2018-1175 BOA. Request by applicant for a waiver of the staff interpretation of section 115 drainage and flood control of St. Tammany's Parish Code of Ordinance regarding the use of the preliminary firm map to determine the finished floor elevation and according to the preliminary base flood elevation. The property is located at 320 Hawk Drive, Slidell, Louisiana. The applicant is Douglas Graffio. He's represented by Norman Manton Jr. The applicant is requesting the staff interpretation of section 115 drainage and flood control of St. Tammany Parish Code of Ordinance regarding the use of the preliminary firm map and the preliminary base flood elevation to determine the required finished floor elevation. Staff comments, please.
Mrs. Sabrina Shank will present the case.
Staff maintains that the elevation requirement is valid for the following reasons. The site is located in a parish critical drainage area and in flood zone A, as shown on the preliminary flood map, as per section 115-3B1, critical drainage areas. The site is then anticipated to be inundated by a 100-year storm event. It has been determined that proposed habitable structures below the base flood elevation. As a participating FEMA National Flood Insurance Program community, St. Tammany Parish is required to use the best available data for floodplain determinations. Therefore, the preliminary BFE is then referred to determine the required finished floor elevation and to prevent the finished floor elevation of new habitable structures from being lower than the base flood elevation. Section 115.3B9E, based on available data, the Department of Development Engineering may require a higher finished floor elevation on pier construction above the FEMA base flood elevation. Department of Planning and Development Engineering has determined that the preliminary flood maps are the best available data for establishing the required finished floor elevation in that area. And finally, considering the purpose, policy, and intent of the fill ordinance is to protect the public health, safety, welfare, and property of residents of unincorporated St. Tammany Parish, the parish engineers and staff have a statutory duty to administer the fill ordinance. To that effect, staff has determined that it is not in the best interest of the public health, safety, welfare, and property to construct a new habitable structure with a finished floor elevation below the base flood.
Is the applicant present? Will you please come forward and state your name and address for the records, please?
Douglas Graffio, 320 Hawk Drive, Slidell, Louisiana.
Mr. Graffio, do you have anything further to add?
Yes, the proposed elevation of the mother-in-law cottage that I'm building is not below the current residence that's there. So if there was going to be flooding, my house would be flooded as well. Plus, my mother-in-law, who the cottage is for, is 72 years old, in failing health, weighs all of 80 pounds. I just took her to the doctor today, and she cannot go up and down stairs. She's on 100% oxygen 24/7, and building at that height makes it unusable for her.
I'm Norman Manton.
Okay, Mr. Mann, just state your name and address, please.
Yes, sir. Norman Manton. I live at 811 West 11th Avenue in Covington. I'm a contractor for RKP Contractors for Mr. Graffio. When we started this project, we were unaware of the change in the base flood as the parish was. Apparently, we didn't know that it had been increased. What I did is I used an elevation of 12 inches above his existing residence, and it's actually tied into the house. I have a map that shows the concrete that's here, but the ramp that was proposed that I put in to get to that elevation would cause further flooding to not only Mr. Graffio's property, but the surrounding properties. I'm putting in and proposed to put in a commercial catch basin to catch the water between the residents and the little mother-in-law suite. It's actually only 400 feet of living area. The rest is garage. And on this plan, it's maybe 30 feet from the existing structure. And if I raised it up that high, I'd have no alternative but to put an elevator in it because you can't go upstairs. And I'd be adding more fill, creating adverse conditions. And, you know, if y'all can work with us on it, we appreciate it. We certainly understand.
Mr. Gordon?
Mr. Graffia,
Yes, sir.
is this on? Did you flood?
No, sir.
This is for staff. Right now, best I can tell, he's in the flood zone C. Effective firm, correct?
Effective firm, correct.
All right, we haven't established prelim firms yet in this parish, have we?
We have not adopted them.
Okay.
We-
Is there an ordinance right now that is requesting you all to use prelim firm across the board for everybody, or are y'all doing that selectively in certain areas?
The ordinance states use the best available data. We have confirmed that the best available data in that area is the preliminary D firm. Our own studies confirm the base flood elevation that FEMA has established as proposed.
So that is established by ordinance, that's not,
Correct?
okay. You said that you were gonna you could connect this?
Yes, sir, absolutely.
Could you put a breezeway from your structure to the house?
Yes, sir.
If need be, absolutely.
If you put a breezeway, then it becomes part of the main structure and all of this goes away.
Be happy to do that.
Thank you.
Wasn't that proposed?
Yeah, for it. Yeah, we did approve that. That's okay.
Mr. Ballantyne? Mr. Ballantyne, you had your light on?
Yeah. Is it on?
Should be on.
I guess, Mr. Chairman, I'm uncomfortable with this case being in our jurisdiction. I'm uncomfortable with voting on floodplains. I don't know that we're capable of passing judgment on what should be done in the different floodplains. So, can anybody advise us on that, or, I mean, why is this coming before us?
Staff
Ba-
or legal?
Basically, you know, they were challenging the interpretation of the staff, as it's stated in the staff report. And the body to address that challenge is the Board of Adjustments. And I'm sure Mr. Savant can add to my statement.
Yes.
Well, Ms. Lambert is correct.
Ma'am, I'm hitting you, you hitting it, go ahead, I'm sorry.
You ready?
We're playing tech.
Ms. Lambert is correct. You know, Mr. Ballantyne, the matter is before this body because the applicant is either challenging the interpretation by parish staff of parish regulations, which they have the right to do, and/or they are requesting a waiver of the parish regulations as this board commonly sees. And so the fact that it may involve matters concerning elevation, et cetera, it's still building related and therefore appropriate to be presented to this body on appeal.
Happy with that? Craig?
Well, I was just gonna also say, besides that, we were tasked, we may not agree with it, but we were tasked with dealing with fill, the fill ordinance. Part of it is, yeah.
Mr. Brookton?
Mr. Hand, if they would put a breezeway from the structure to their house, would that be okay?
Yes, and I'll ask for Helen's confirmation since she asked for mine. Under our regulations, when breezeways are constructed between two structures, meeting a certain building criteria, then they are considered, as Mr. Gordon had stated, a single structure joined by a breezeway.
However, the breezeway would have to be a minimum of 10 foot wide.
That's understandable. Yeah, 12 feet is what I intended on building anyway.
So you had
But-
no requirement, I mean, have no problem with that?
No problem doing it 12 feet wide at all.
Let's
We
just
suggested that previously.
let's confirm that even if there's a breezeway attached to it, Mrs. Shankin, you confirm that it will still meet the requirements, or how would we
I can confirm that.
handle the?
I believe that would, in our interpretation, make it an addition, not an accessory structure. Additions are allowed to maintain the same elevation as the house. They wouldn't be able to raise it, as I understand it. It would have to meet the existing elevation of the home.
That's amenable for you and I.
Do we have any other questions from any of the members? Mr. Gordon?
Well, if they're agreeing to do a breezeway and this goes away, then what do we do?
You can deny the variance.
So a variance wouldn't be needed then, so
They can withdraw the variance, or you can make a motion to deny.
Yeah, we can withdraw it. I just want to be assured that if I withdraw it, that if I come back another week with a breezeway, that I'm not going to get sent back to your office and back over here.
As I said, the breezeway has to be 10 feet
Okay.
wide minimum,
Okay.
and then you will still have to meet certain requirements from what Mrs. Shank said. You will have to meet the same elevation as the house.
Same elevation, it can't exceed a certain percentage of the overall house, things like that, but it's a small structure.
Can I get
Would-
those percentages so that we know that there's no confusion?
We can get that for you, yes, sir.
Thank you.
I guess we're done then.
I withdraw my request for a variance.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Wait, just a second.
Was it good?
as long as it's less than 50% of the structure. It's 50%. As long as it's less than 50%, it's not. But I would check that because I think you can go higher, you just can't go lower than the
Excuse me, Mr. Manton, we're not quite finished yet, just a second. Under talking to our attorney, I think the best procedure to go by is to postpone this particular case. In case there is a problem, you could come back before us if everything is not met. So by postponing it, you don't have to reapply and so forth. We just postpone, and if you can work it out with staff, then the matter will be resolved.
So can we postpone it till the next regular?
Yeah, it'll be postponed to the next regular meeting, but if it gets worked
Outstanding.
out, it will never come back up on the agenda because y'all will work it out with staff. So, we need a vote on a motion to postpone and a vote.
I make a motion to postpone.
We have a motion to postpone. Do we have any discussion?
Yeah, just to be clear, as long as you're less than 50% of the other structure, you can build at that elevation. I would check because I've never heard that you couldn't build higher, you can only build lower. So, I
That's
mean,
why
that's,
we're
the
gonna do it
logic
12
doesn't
inches
tell me
above to
that.
begin.
So you might want to check in with the, with the permit department.
Yeah.
I mean, who's to
It's
say you
confusing
can't
me.
put
I've
a
been
step
for
in your
30
house?
years. First one I ever had like this.
Right, so check on that, but
Okay, thank you.
We have a motion on the floor and a second. We'll vote, begin voting with your machine.
To postpone 1 month.
Yeah, and the motion is to postpone for 1 month the case. So would everybody please vote with your lights? Mr. Ballantyne, you voting? I did. You didn't show up.
Motion carried.
Motion carried. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, John.
Our next case is BOA case number 2018-1180, BOA. Request by applicant for a variance in an MD3 medical facility zoning district to reduce the required number of parking spaces from 243 required parking spaces to a total of 130 parking spaces. The property is located at 201 Greenbrier Boulevard, Covington, Louisiana. The applicant is Covington Behavioral Health LLC, Wes Crayford, CEO. The representative is Allison Bondurant, attorney. Requested variance, the applicant is seeking a variance to reduce the required number of parking spaces from 247 required parking spaces to a total of 130 parking spaces. Staff comments, please.
Yes, basically, the request is to maintain the existing 130 existing parking spaces on the site. And the reasons for the request are as follow. The functions and services provided by the hospital consist of treatment of patients with psychiatric and substance abuse needs. Since the facility is a controlled, locked environment with patient visitation limited to 1 hour per day, the traffic generated by the facility is considerably lower than a full-service hospital. Also, the second reason is to preserve the existing buffer along the west side of the property between the existing parking lot and the abutting Normandy Oak residential subdivision and reduce the need for additional retention and detention for water runoff. As shown on the attached plan, the rear of the facility will be bounded by a future private outdoor fenced-in patient area. The waiver of the required additional number of parking spaces would allow to maintain a large buffer area and reduce or eliminate the potential for outside individuals to see the patients inside the fence, approach the fence, and have contact with the patients. And finally, the last reason is to preserve a certain distance between the existing parking area and the proximity to the ambulance loading area, and to reduce or eliminate the potential for visitors to see patients being admitted to the facility. Staff is not in favor of the requested variance. Although current and future services offered by the hospital and the proposed expansion may not require as many parking spaces as a full-service hospital, there's no compelling reason to recommend approval, considering there's sufficient space on the site to provide the required number of parking spaces and meet the minimum buffer and setback requirements. Moreover, the services provided by the hospital and the total number of staff members could increase at any time, making the minimum number of parking spaces necessary to be provided.
Is the applicant present?
Yes.
Will you please come forward and state your name for the records, please?
Yes, my name is Allison Bondurant. My address is 227 Highway 21, Madisonville, Louisiana. I'm representative for Covington Behavioral Health, LLC. Also present with me is Wes Crawford, the CEO. Address for Covington Behavioral Health is 201 Greenbrier Boulevard, Covington, Louisiana. Covington Behavioral Health has come before the Board of Adjustments to request this variance in order to provide sorely needed mental health services to this community, but to minimize the impact on not only the residents of its facility, but also to the neighborhood residents of Normandy Oaks, the villages at Normandy Oaks, and other adjacent neighborhoods immediately adjacent to the subdivision. I think this is one of those few cases where you might find that just about everyone in the area wants the same thing here. The residents of the neighborhood firmly agree with us on this particular issue. You know, you don't have an issue of a big corporation doing something that the residents don't want to do. We actually all agree in this particular area. I know you're going to hear from the residents subsequent to my presentation. Covington Behavioral Health currently operates a 60-bed facility for psychiatric and mental health facilities, including addiction treatment, right here in Covington. It's one of the few facilities that does so. They're proposing to increase their facility, or they are increasing their facility to 104 beds, a 44-bed increase. This, under the MD3 designation, would require an increase of parking to 243 parking spaces, and we're requesting that the parking be essentially maintained at 130 parking spaces. The reason for that request is multifold. Specifically, the parking is not a necessary element for the operation of the facility. Presently, the staff of the facility operates at about 75 staff members. It's a controlled lockdown facility, as Ms. Lambert said, which means that this isn't a type of hospital where patients come and go and drive themselves to the facility. There are very limited outpatient services provided, less than 15 or so individuals on a daily basis during the week. So you don't have a lot of comings and goings. The inpatient services are provided 24/7, obviously, and the outpatient procedure, people are serviced from 9 to 1, 9 a.m. in the morning to 1 p.m. in the afternoon. In the afternoon, there's a 1-hour visitation period from 3:30 to 4:30 where visitors are allowed to see their family members or relatives or friends who are in the facility. And we have done some studies about the amount of parking that is used during both of those periods of time. On a maximum basis, the parking that's used at the facility, based on the counts that we did, is about 75 spaces max right now in the mornings between 9 and 1 when the outpatient people are present at the facility. During visiting hours, the parking numbers drop to 60 cars approximately on average for those time periods. When you look at the need for the expansion and what is going to be added to this facility, we can tell you this. There will be no new outpatient services provided. There will be 44 new inpatient beds, but that will only require an increase of 10 staff people per shift. So during your day shift, which is your busy shift, you'll have an increase of approximately 10 different professionals that will work on the premises. There will be no requirements for new administrative staff, no new accounts payable people, no new general admin, no human resources, no receptionists, no major management. So there's not going to be a massive increase in staff, and that's as a result of the way the facility currently operates. And so when you look at the morning increase or the overall increase from staff, it's going to be 10 people, so maybe 10 cars. In terms of the number of visitors that you will see in the facility, the parking, there's no anticipation that it will be a correlative increase to the current amount of parking during the visiting hours. Right now, there are 60 cars on average during visiting hours. Well, there's 60 patients. So you don't have a 1-to-1 ratio of patient to individual to patient to individual visitors. You have much less than that. So even if you were to assume a 1-to-1 ratio, which is not going to happen. There's a 73% increase in the number of beds, but there, even if you did a 73% increase in the number of parking for visitors, it would still be only 104 total cars in the parking lot during the visiting hours. That would be the max. So we're asking for a maintenance of 130 spaces. During the morning shift, we expect an addition of 10 cars over the current approximately 75 cars. So 85 to 90 additional cars in the parking lot at that time. Subsequent to that, you will see in the afternoons, even under the worst estimation, somewhere in the neighborhood of 100 or so cars in the parking lot. That's well below the 130 spots that are going to be requested. And so, those are the kind of the basic facts surrounding the facility. And I think it's also important to note, the facility operates, is going to be operating and providing adolescent psychiatric facilities, 16 beds, a sorely needed service. Right now, kids are being shipped all the way to Shreveport from this area for that service. So it's a critical service for our community. And in this case, we meet all the requirements for requesting this variance in terms of the compelling reasons why it's necessary. In this case, what you guys consider several factors in terms of whether a variance is necessary or should be granted. Outlined obviously in your application process, and particularly first factor is whether the building of this facility presents a practical difficulty or an unnecessary hardship. I think that Covington Behavioral Health can show in spades that it both presents a practical difficulty and an unnecessary hardship. Unnecessary hardship can first be shown by the statistics that we just gave you all. First and foremost, the parking is not necessary. The facility operates at, a maximum of approximately 60% occupancy, and the increase in the size of the facility will not increase correspondingly, and should, based on our estimations, be maintained below the 130 parking spaces that will be allowed. I think anybody that you will see, and as the packet photos that you can see between the photos that are in your meeting packet, as well as those provided by the neighborhood, can show you, Google Earth satellite images, this parking lot is always empty during the day. It really is. And so, is it unnecessary? Yes. Is it a hardship? Absolutely. It's a hardship, particularly on this neighborhood. Covington and St. Tammany, prides itself on maintaining its wooded areas and beautiful trees. There is a 200-foot green space between Normandy Oaks neighborhood and this parking lot. The area to the rear of the facility is also wooded. It's also in a floodplain. That area to the rear of the facility, which I can show you on an overall map, but it's in the mapping. It's the same map that's in your packet. To the rear of the facility is in a floodplain and provides privacy for the residents. And so with regard to that privacy issue, you have a twofold issue. One, we want to protect the residents of Covington Behavioral Health. They require privacy. Currently, the tree buffer keeps people from being able to walk to the rear of the property. That particular site condition would not exist in the after if we were to build all the parking that's required. We'd have to tear down, a buffer of 200 feet of trees by several hundred feet wide, which would leave no buffer between the rear of the facility and the privacy of these residents, who are people suffering from addiction and depression and psychosis, and who don't need anyone being able to approach the facility from the rear. We also, as Ms. Lambert pointed out, have asked for this because the ambulance bay where patients enter is right next to where the parking would have to be placed. It's the only place that parking could be placed on the site. And those patients enter in that place, and the last thing you want to do is have people being able to park and look right into the backside of the facility. And third, and I think very importantly, as you will hear from the neighborhood members who are present here in the audience, as well as going to speak on their own behalf, if we were to be required to build this amount of parking, we would tear down virtually all of the trees between and all of the bushes and shrubbery between Normandy Oaks and the facility. Normandy Oaks is a neighborhood. Between it and its garden home area called the Villages is 300 homes. And as you could see from the application packet that was presented to you by the neighborhood, more than 500 residents have signed up to support this particular variance because it's that important to these neighborhood members. This keeps privacy for those who are immediately adjacent to the facility, but it also provides a natural buffer between a medical facility and the neighborhood, which is good for everyone. It's good for the residents of the facility, and it's good for the residents of this neighborhood, and it's good for St. Tammany overall. If we were to build an ocean of concrete right in this parking area, there would be no cars there, and we would just be the thing that St. Tammany, I think, tries not to be, which is, just oceans and oceans of parking with, without any beautiful green space left for the neighboring landowners and for our residents. So with respect to that, I think we can show both an unnecessary hardship and a practical difficulty. There's no other place on the site that this parking can be built because the rear of the facility is in a floodplain and is also an area where detention and retention will be placed for the remainder of the facility. So those are the two things with regard to item 1. With regard to item 2, does this variance impose adverse effects on the neighbors? The board generally looks at whether the variance will impose adverse effects on the neighbors, and if the neighbors are going to be adversely impacted to the negative by the variance, then you would consider not granting it. As I've said before, this is a wonderful case where we can say that we're all in alignment on this particular issue. The neighbors want these trees. They want to protect their privacy. They want to maintain the current atmosphere of their neighborhood, the current situation, and it's a significant number of people. We're not talking about 5 people. We're talking about hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people, families. Tons of people live in this neighborhood, and this would actually, to not allow the variance would create an adverse impact. So we've iterated that very clearly here today, and I'll let the neighborhood people speak to that on their own part. Is this a financial hardship? You guys don't like to consider things that are strictly a financial hardship on the property owner. And I'll tell you, in this particular case, while the parking would be more expensive, that's not a factor here. As a matter of fact, we were going to proceed with building the parking because we had previously applied for a variance. We didn't get a staff recommendation, so we chose to proceed rather than come to a hearing. But through a request of the neighboring landowners, we reiterated the application, have delayed our construction on this project in order to allow for the board to have the chance to decide this for the benefit of our community. With regard to that, it's a cost to the client to delay the construction. So, is it a financial hardship to ask for this variance? No, it's actually a financial hardship. It would have just been better for us to proceed, and we were planning on doing it. So that's not a reason for this application. And with regard to whether this is a self-imposed request, it's not self-imposed because, again, while the parking could be built, the site conditions do not allow us to build it in a way that would preserve the existing situation and not adversely impact the neighborhood. And then finally, the last factor that you all consider is whether this could be used for precedent in future cases. I think on that point, I'd like to offer the fact that, how many cases will you see where a mental health facility is located adjacent to a neighborhood? Very few, probably hardly ever. How often will you see that it's being expanded in the way that this particular one is expanded? Probably not a lot. How many will have this odd site condition where the parking lot can only be located next to the neighborhood? Really not probably ever. And this parking variance situation wouldn't ever apply to a retail shopping center because the factors that we're asking for have very particular things to do with this type of use. So we don't think this could serve as precedent for other subdivision or other development type opportunities to ask for a variance. And then last, we want to address the staff comments with regard to the fact that any other use could be placed on this property at any time within the MD3 designation. MD3 is a designation for full-service hospitals as well as this type of psychiatric facility. But the reality is that a full-service hospital could not be built on this location without investing tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars in this property. And the size of the property just doesn't provide any kind of logic for that to happen. I mean, this property is located, within almost walking distance of St. Tammany Parish Hospital. It's not the type of facility that would be converted to a full med-surg facility. And the types of facilities, an equal size facility is Riverside Medical Center in Franklinton. That hospital provides an unreal amount of services that this hospital is not even equipped to handle. ER, ICU, isolation rooms for the types of things that would be an infectious disease, surgery facilities, anesthesia services, cardiac care. The list goes on. To add those types of things to a facility like this would cost, I said, tens of millions of dollars, if not hundreds of millions of dollars. So the idea that this facility could be easily converted, there's a gigantic barrier of entry. There's additionally regulatory issues that go into play with approving a new med-surg hospital and converting this to that use. So, with regard to that, we think that that factor should be discounted in light of all the other factors. And we ask that the board consider the variance and consider the statements of the residents who are going to speak. Thank you so much for your time. If you have questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Let me see. Tom?
Is there anyone, before we listen to more comments, is there anybody in here that is opposed to this variance, is opposed to this project at all? So everybody out there, you're all here to speak in favor of this? Mr. Chairman, I would forego listening to all the comments.
Okay, well, Mr. Gordon had a question also, but unless you make it a motion, Tom, I'm going to open the floor to Mr. Gordon.
Yeah, I'm making a motion to that.
You making a motion?
Yeah. A motion to forego listening to all the comments, and if there's nobody opposed.
Make a motion to approve the
You got to either
variance.
make a motion to approve or disapprove, Tom.
I'll make a motion to approve the variance as submitted.
Okay. We have a motion to approve and a second. Do we have any questions? Mr. Gordon, I know you had your light on. I don't know if you have any questions now that there's motions on the floor.
Ms. Bondurant? I assume this isn't going to be a school bus parking lot for like Lowe's or the other big box stores do?
No, not at all. There's no school next door. They don't allow other people to park in their parking
They're
lot.
going to let the RVs park there overnight like Walmart?
Yeah, I don't believe that there's going to be any tailgating in the parking lot of the psychiatric facility, sir. Okay.
We have a motion on the floor and a second. Do we have any other comments or questions? Hearing none, Ms. Secretary, would you put on the voting lights, please? Thank you. Will all members please vote with your lights?
Motion carries.
Thank you very much.
Our next case All right, our next case is BOA case number 2018-1181 BOA. Request by applicant for a variance in an A4 single-family residential zoning district to allow for the construction of a boathouse between Carr Drive and Fasine Canal as per the site plan submitted. The property is located at 425 Carr Drive, Slidell, Louisiana. The applicant is Mary Landrew. Representatives John Kleinsmith, Wagoner and Ball LLC. The applicant is seeking a variance to reduce the required setbacks to allow for the construction of a boathouse between Carr Drive and Fasine Canal as part of the site plan submitted. Staff comments, please.
North Shore Beach subdivision is unique compared to other developments in many of the lots are separated by Carr Drive. The particular lot configuration allows for the owners to build a main residence on the lakeside and a boathouse on the canal side. Although the primary purpose of the smaller lots on the canal side were meant to be used for dock and boathouses, throughout the years, some of the boathouses have been converted into residences. As shown in the attached drawing, the applicant is seeking approval to allow for the construction of a boathouse residence of approximately 2,418 square feet over the Fashion Canal. No part of the boathouse is planned to be built on Lot 8B, except for a portion of the connecting stairs access to the structure. No formal setback is being requested, considering that the boathouse is proposed to be completely built over Fashion Canal. Considering that the applicant does not own a portion of the canal, a signed statement from Mr. Jason Carr, legal owner of the canal's water bottom, has been provided, indicating no objection to the construction of the structure as shown on the attached plan. The request to construct the boathouse is consistent with other existing boathouses along Carr Drive. Therefore, given the uniqueness of the development and that the owners of the canal's water bottom does not object to the construction of the boathouse over Fashion Canal, the staff has no objection to granting the variance as requested per the boathouse site plan number 1602 dated June 14, 2018.
Is the applicant present? Please come forward and state your name and address for the records, please.
Emily Palumbo with Wagner and Ball LLC. John Kleinschmidt is my colleague, but I was on maternity leave when we submitted the application. So I'm representing the owner, Ms. Landrew. 2200 Britannia Street, New Orleans, Louisiana, 70130.
And what is your last name again, please?
Palumbo.
Palumbo.
Thank you.
Do you have anything further to add, Ms. Palumbo?
No, I would just kind of reiterate Ms. Lambert's statements that this has become pretty consistent along Carr Drive, and it is a very unique road on the North Shore, and so the conditions for construction are a little bit different than some other places. So that's it.
Do we have any questions from anyone? Greg?
Is there an existing home on the main lot on the lake?
Not yet, no. But
Are
there
they
will.
planning on building one?
Yes, they are.
At the same time, or?
No, it will come later in the future. I think once we're under construction, we'll turn towards the design of this larger structure. I think trying to just get a toehold on that side of the lake first to be better equipped to build is the owner's intent. But they absolutely do plan to build a larger structure on the main lot, Lot 8.
Thank you.
Do we have any other questions? Can I entertain a motion? Mr. Gordon?
Yeah, I'm quite familiar with the area. There are numerous boathouses on that side doing the exact same thing, so I make a motion to approve the variance.
We have a motion to approve. Do I have a second?
I second.
We have a motion and a second. Do we have any discussion? Hearing none. Ms. Secretary, would put the lights on for vote. Would everybody please vote with your lights?
All in favor, motion passed.
Motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Our last case is BOA case number 2018-1182, BOA. Request by applicant for a variance in a PF1 Public Facility Zoning District to allow to mitigate a portion of the required caliber inches of removed live oak trees with a variety of existing species of Class A trees on the site and with a variety of newly planted species of Class A trees instead of live oak trees. The property is located at 13505 Highway 1085, Covington, Louisiana. The applicant is St. Tammany Recreation District Number 14, Richard Bentley Smith, Representative Joseph W. Furr. Requested variance, the applicant is requesting a variance to allow to mitigate a portion of the required caliber inches of removed live oak trees with a variety of existing species of Class A trees on the site and with a variety of newly planted species of Class A trees instead of live oak trees. Staff comments, please?
Hello? Okay, just wanted to make sure it was on. The attached drawing in your packet, identified as L1 and dated on 7/7/2018, shows the total number of trees planted since construction of the park began in 2008. Many of the trees located on the site were only planted for beautification of the park and not to meet any minimum requirements within the buffers, parking lots, or mitigation for removed trees. The applicant is requesting to use previously planted additional Class A trees as mitigation credits. The total number of the additional trees currently equates to a net extra balance of 193 inches of Class A trees. Staff does not object to using the previously planted Class A trees that were not required as part of buffer, parking lot, or mitigation trees in previous construction phases of Coquille Park, to be used for mitigation for the trees as well as mitigation of Class A trees in future phases of the project. So basically creating a mitigation bank of trees that they've already planted on the site. Although the project landscape architect does not anticipate any further mitigation to be required in the build-out of the park. Finally, staff is in favor of using a mix of species instead of just live oaks to replace the live oaks that did need to be removed to promote a more interesting development and biologically diverse site.
Is the applicant present? Will you please come forward and state your name and address for the records, please?
Mr. Furr couldn't make it today. My name is Danny Weedig, 103 Wallace Road, Madisonville, Louisiana. I'm the construction coordinator for St. Tammany Parish Recreational District 14.
Mr. Whittick, do you have anything further to add?
Not really. We've planted a lot of trees, a lot of different variety of trees, and we plan on planting even more trees. We have many, many live oaks on our property. It's a beautiful piece of property. Just a small amount is coming out with our expansion. So as soon as we can clear and develop more of our constituents, we'll be able to see all the beautiful live oaks that are on the property. It is just some gorgeous historic oaks that are there, and we're not taking anything out like that. These are smaller oaks that we've taken out.
See no one's lights on, no questions. Can I entertain a motion? Oh, I'm sorry, legal has a question.
Regan, just for curiosity, because this board has seen an application by, I believe, the neighbor across the street with the, I'll call it the Gulf States Development, and there was a landscape issue there. How does this all fit together, or even does it? In respect to, if I recall, and I'll try to make my question more precise, I believe the neighbor across the highway had issues meeting landscape requirements. They were hoping to meet them with the assistance of the rec district, but were unable to do so.
They met the requirements on their own site.
They have
So they're
been
no
able
longer,
to?
yes.
Okay, great, thank you.
Any other questions? Can I entertain a motion?
I make a motion to grant the variance.
We have a motion. I see some other lights on. Is someone else who wants to make comments? Greg, okay. We have a motion on the floor in a second. Do we have any questions? Hearing none, would everybody please vote with your lights?
All in favor?
Motion passes.
Motion passed.
Thank you.
Going into old business. Tom, any old business?
No whole business?
Any new business?
We have one case for next month, and I guess I just wanted to get everybody's take on the packet. I've tried to add as much information as possible, as well as some aerials, and hopefully it is helpful to all.
Excellent.
Greg?
Now, Helen, is that the one case, the one that the board postponed today, or is that in addition to that one?
Well, all the cases that we have we've had. I've tried to do my best to add as much information as I can, to email you as much information as I can when I get, letters in favor or in objection. I've tried to scan them in and email them and try to add aerials to the packet, so it gives you an idea of where it's located, even if you don't get a chance to.
No,
Oh, I'm sorry.
saying that the case regarding, the mother-in-law cottage, and we postponed it because they were gonna try to,
Work it out with
that's
staff.
in addition to the case you have?
Yes, that's
So
correct.
there'll be two cases, okay.
Unless if they withdraw it before.
Yeah, right.
Yes.
So that's, yeah, well, since it's postponed, I would recommend that it go on the agenda anyway.
Okay,
And if it's resolved, then the board could just remove it from their agenda.
okay, no problem.
And just so y'all know, I received the packet after I would have had to have left to come to the meeting last week. It came that day, but it came to my house like 3 o'clock. That's when the mailman delivered it last Tuesday,
We talk about this,
my packet. Yes.
So I have two options. I can have it delivered to the Towers building for you, and if you want to pick it up.
I've never had an issue getting it in the past. It just
Oh,
must have gone
that's,
out late.
that's the first time it happened?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay.
I don't know if y'all sent them out late or not.
I don't know that we did, but,
I got mine pretty early.
Okay, then maybe the mailman,
Sometimes that happens.
because it's stamped August 27th. And I didn't get it until,
because they were put in the mail on a Friday before. Not the Friday before the meeting, the,
Louis, you got yours, no problem, early?
yeah, I got mine early.
My guy might have misplaced it, and, no problem, I'm just letting you know.
okay,
Aerials were nice, though.
good, thank you.
Yeah, good. Do we have any other new business? Motion to adjourn?
Everybody will be here next month?
Yes.
I'll be here.
Everybody will be next month? Okay, we have a motion to adjourn? Do we have a motion? I can't make that motion. Can we?
I make a motion to adjourn.
All in favor?
Actually, Tim, technically, if all business is finished, you can simply,
Adjourn the meeting?
you can, but, I mean, Mr. Savant may argue that, I don't know.
Only if the agenda says adjournment at the end, then you're correct. The chair can just adjourn the meeting without entertaining a motion. But if the meeting agenda is silent as to an adjournment at the end of the meeting, to show that the meeting ends following the last item on the agenda,
I'm too dumb.
then you have to entertain a motion.
Okay,
So what does it say?
it says adjourn.
It says adjourn.
So I can adjourn. Okay, but before everybody leave, can everybody gather for a second? We have one thing to discuss. Then nothing with the meet, after the meeting yet.
So you've declared the motion, the meeting
Yeah,
adjourned?
meeting is adjourned.
Okay.
Because I was gonna
Just
object, I
one-
really didn't wanna leave yet.
One
One thing.
suggestion